This is Part 2, Episode 71. Something strange happened next. Two silver streaks of light burst out from their left legs, and then intertwined together as they enveloped their bodies. They both disappeared at the same time for an instant, and their bodies instantly switched positions in the next moment. Hu Yuhao stared at Wang Chua with an astonished look on his face. Wang Chua said decisively, "Let's try again further away." She raced out as she spoke, and ran about 100 meters away, as she gestured toward Hu Yuhao. Hu Yuhao released his soul power and activated his left leg bone as he attempted to establish a connection with Wang Chua on the other side. However, he realized that he couldn't feel anything at all, and nothing changed. Wang Chua came 10 meters closer, and Hu Yuhao continued to try. Nothing was different from before. Wang Chua wasn't hasty either, and she slowly shifted forward bit by bit. Finally, when she was about 50 meters away from him, silver light exploded from their bodies at the same time, and Wang Chua immediately appeared before Hu Yuhao. This wasn't the instant shift carried by their left leg bones anymore, as instant shift only had a range of 10 meters. This magnet-like force between them increased its range by 500%, and this was achieved with just Hu Yuhao pulling Wang Chua to his side. This effect was similar to Shu Sanxi's mysterious netherworld displacement, after his shield of the Xianming turtle evolved into the Xuanwu shield, except Shu Sanxi's mysterious netherworld displacement could target opponents weaker than he was. Hu Yuhao could only use this with Wang Chua. They exchanged a look, and they thought about the countless possibilities. They already had a martial soul fusion skill, and this special effect carried by their left leg bones was a cherry on the cake for them. In addition to their new instant shift ability, both of them felt as if they had struck a jackpot. "Let's go. We're going to the setting sun forest." It was nearly noon at this point. The sun was high in the sky, and it radiated scorching warmth. "Let's go, then." Wang Chua agreed. Hu Yuhao heaved a sigh of relief when she began to cooperate, and they activated their flying-type soul tools before they soared into the sky once more. Hu Yuhao wasn't acting hastily anymore, and he flew together with Wang Chua as they followed the map's markings and traveled towards the setting sun forest. They hadn't flown for long, however, before Hu Yuhao suddenly felt something and gazed into the horizon, while he slowed down at the same time. "What's wrong?" Wang Chua asked confusedly. "Someone's coming here." Hu Yuhao answered. Wang Chua followed his gaze. Indeed, there was a group of people flying towards them in the distance from where Heaven Do City was located. They were in a fan-like formation, and their formation gradually changed in the sky and formed a semicircle that wrapped toward the two of them, enemies. Wang Chua asked confusedly. Hu Yuhao shook his head and said, "Perhaps not. They should be from the Heavenly Soul Empire. This is my fault for being so careless. We're very close to Heaven Do City, and we are just flying through the air without attempting to conceal our movements. I think we have attracted the sentry's attention." Wang Chua's mouth twitched, and she said, "We're just flying in the sky. What does that have to do with them?" The group had surrounded them while they talked. There were 10 soul engineers, and everyone wore standardized flying-type soul tools. They weren't flying very fast, so it wouldn't be impossible if Hu Yuhao and Wang Chua wanted to shake them off. He wanted to get to the setting sun forest as fast as possible, but he also didn't want to bring unnecessary trouble upon himself. If they were suspected to be spying upon Heaven Do City, and thus attracted the attention of powerful individuals in the Heavenly Soul Empire, then there would be real trouble for him. The Heavenly Soul Empire's national strength couldn't compare to the Star Luo Empire, but they were still a nation with a long history and solid foundations. The soul engineers didn't attack as they came up, they just surrounded the two of them. Hu Yuhao didn't unleash any offensive soul tools, and he raised both hands to show that he meant no ill. These soul engineers from the Heavenly Soul Empire were all wearing leather armor, which was clearly intended to lessen the weight they had to carry. The person leading the group was a girl with a cold look on her face, appearing both elegant and noble. The flying-type soul tool behind her released pale blue light. "Who are you? How dare you fly around inside our capital city's airspace? You're looking down on my country. Follow me." Her cold voice felt extremely charming and nice to hear, but the contents were a little unpleasant. Hu Yuhao was slightly taken aback, as he stared at the young girl before him confusedly. Are you Mu Shui?" The ice-cold young girl was also momentarily stunned. She stared at Hu Yuhao with the same doubtful look and asked, "How do you know my name?" Hu Yuhao heaved a sigh of relief once she confirmed his speculation. "Have you forgotten, Mu Shui? We've met before inside the Great Star Doe Forest. Back then, Uncle Mo was the one leading the group, and you guys were inside the Great Star Doe Forest to hunt soul beasts. My name is Hui Yuhao. Mu Shui scrutinized Hui Yuhao for a moment longer. A look of revelation came over her face as she said, "Oh, yes, I remember now. You're that student from the Star Luo National Academy, Hui Yuhao, am I right?" She turned towards Wang Qiu'er as they moved up. It wasn't just her, all the other soul engineers were also focused on Wang Qiu'er. This wasn't because they had realized how powerful Wang Qiu'er was, it was because Wang Qiu'er was simply too beautiful. Wang Qiu'er looked more like the goddess of light than Wang Dong'er did. There wasn't any cover in the sky at this moment, and sunlight shone upon her body and made her flowing blue hair shine with pale golden light. Her enchanting beauty was nearly suffocating. Mu Shui had always been confident about her looks, and this was especially so, because her martial soul's unique quality was different from normal people. However, she felt a little inferior before Wang Qiu'er. She paled in comparison in terms of looks and aura, and even in terms of her figure. Hui Yuhao frowned as he lowered his voice and said, "I'm sorry, Mu Shui. I'm in a hurry, and today's matter is just a misunderstanding. I have somewhere I need to be, and I accidentally trespassed in the Heaven Do City's airspace. I am sincerely sorry that this happened, but time is of the essence. I can't delay any longer." Mu Shui also lowered her voice. "You don't get to make that decision. Are you resisting arrest? You have to know that we have the authority to shoot you down since you've trespassed over our airspace. I'll bring you back to the city, because we have been acquainted, and we'll investigate to make sure that there's nothing wrong with the two of you, and then we'll let you go. Don't worry, we'll be just and follow official procedures." A yellow light suddenly expanded from Hui Yuhao's body and enveloped the two of them, a Class 6 soul barrier. 9 beams of light landed on the barrier and created ripple after ripple, but the soul barrier didn't so much as tremble. Hui Yuhao knew that they had no choice but to fight. "Don't do anything, Qiu'er." Hui Yuhao instructed Wang Qiu'er as his eyes suddenly lit up. The air within 30 meters of them seemed to contort, and the 9 soul engineers' second shots all missed, while 3 of them were accidentally struck by their companions and fell from the sky. Light erupted from behind Hui Yuhao's back, as he activated his soul thrusters explosively and crashed against 2 other soul engineers. He had never been afraid of meeting force with anyone at his level, except for Wang Qiu'er. Furthermore, these soul engineers were just 4-ringed soul ancestors, and they weren't even powerful soul ancestors. He forcefully knocked these 2 soul engineers out of the air, and golden light flickered in his eyes as he turned towards Mu Shui, who was about to make a move. Mu Shui suddenly felt an intense dizziness in her head, and immediately lost her balance. They were high up in the sky, and losing control meant she could no longer hover, so she plummeted towards the ground. "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and save her!" Hui Yuhao shouted at the soul engineers, before they could fire off a third wave of soul paralysis rays, as he dragged Wang Qiu'er off and turned around to run. 3 of the soul engineers were struck by their own paralysis rays and plunged limply through the air. Mu Shui was struck by Hui Yuhao's spiritual confusion and temporarily lost control of her body. The other 2 that were sent hurtling through the air were relatively stronger than the others, but Hui Yuhao didn't damage their flying-type soul tools, so they could still move around. The remaining 4 soul engineers were able to rescue their fallen comrades, but that also meant they couldn't pursue Hui Yuhao and Wang Qiu'er anymore. Wang Qiu'er didn't struggle as Hui Yuhao grasped her hand. She was being pulled along, and this meant she was positioned slightly behind him, and could clearly see Hui Yuhao's profile. Hui Yuhao's face was still scrunched up like before, and his expression was still as black as ever. However, he was a lot calmer than he was when he had left the academy. Wang Qiu'er felt the circulation of soul power between their bodies, and their soul power was intertwined and even flourished. Her eyes were a little lost and vacant. This feeling. Their combined efforts had raised their Class 6 flying-type soul tools flight speed to the highest possible level, and Heaven Do City was now far behind them. An enormous forest gradually came into view in the distance. They were about to reach their destination according to the map's instructions. It was common knowledge that soul masters shouldn't fly above a place inhabited by soul beasts, as it made them easy targets. Hui Yuhao dragged Wang Qiu'er along and quickly descended from the sky, and naturally let go of her hand once they landed on the ground. "Have you not seen enough, after staring at me for so long? Have I recently become more handsome?" Hui Yuhao turned around and smiled at Wang Qiu'er. Wang Qiu'er grunted and said, "Why didn't you kill those people? They were so unreasonable. You didn't let me fight, either. Hui Yuhao laughed exasperatedly. They were just executing their duties, and they had no intention of hurting us. How could I kill them? Furthermore, we did trespass into a city's airspace, so we were in the wrong. Is this the place? Wang Chua didn't pursue the matter, instead changing the topic. Her eyes turned towards the vast forest in front of them. Hui Yuhao nodded and retrieved the map. He had already determined their direction while they were still flying, and the forest had a jagged patch at this location, which was easy to find when they were looking down from high in the sky. It was a lot easier to follow the map and venture into the forest after finding this prominent geographical feature. Let's get going. Wang Chua was the first to move, and she widened her stride towards the forest. Be careful. Hui Yuhao hurriedly caught up with her. According to the map's markings, the place we are looking for is full of dangers. They stepped into the setting sun forest, and they hadn't even taken that many steps before soul beasts appeared within Hui Yuhao's spiritual detection. These soul beasts were pitifully weak. Hui Yuhao and Wang Chua didn't even have to release their auras, and the soul beasts were already scampering away. There was no need to talk about these soul beasts attacking them. They are all 10-year soul beasts. This place is terribly barren and infertile. Wang Chua frowned. Hui Yuhao said, you can't compare this place to the Great Star Do Forest. In the end, the Great Star Do Forest is one of the most prominent places in the entire continent, and the core region's slaughtering grounds is comparable to the core regions of the extreme north. Those spots, along with 3 other extremely dangerous places, are known collectively as the 5 Great Forbidden Regions. Wang Chua grunted and said, there should only be 3. The other 2 only appeared because of our collision with the Sun-Moon continent. Don't you want to speed up, all right? Let's pick up the pace. They didn't feel any threatening presences within the setting sun forest, and Hui Yuhao naturally didn't want to waste any more time. The 2 of them quickened their pace and ventured deeper into the setting sun forest. The vegetation here wasn't as dense as the Great Star Do Forest, so their movements were unimpeded. Furthermore, Hui Yuhao was anxious and worried, so he was moving forward at 60% of his maximum speed, while Wang Chua followed closely beside him. The 2 of them had a tacit understanding, and they didn't hold each other's hands anymore. They were both exceptional individuals among everyone else at the same level, even before they had their martial soul fusion skill. Let's take a break. Hui Yuhao had regained his composure after fusing with the soul bone before this. Wang Donga still had more than 2 years before her injury would take her life, and this matter wasn't that urgent. Hui Yuhao had also seen how incredibly powerful Niu Qian and Titan were with his own eyes, and if a powerful individual like Niu Qian said that this place was filled with dangers, then it couldn't be false. Even though they hadn't encountered any trouble with soul beasts on their journey thus far, Hui Yuhao still decided to take a break after traveling for a certain duration of time, so that they could recover to their optimal states before they pushed forward. He had been inside many places inhabited by soul beasts, and his experience told him that maintaining his best condition was the #1 law of survival. His abilities were relatively formidable, but they still paled in comparison to a world filled with soul beasts. They found a place that was higher than the areas around it so that they could conveniently survey their surroundings, and make it harder for them to get ambushed. They rested while munching on their rations at the same time. How far are we? Wang Chua asked. Hui Yuhao answered, not far. The sky is still bright, so it's easy to tell the direction. We will probably be nearing our destination within 2 hours. Wang Chua nodded and said, Yuhao, I don't know why, but I feel as if something is not right. Hui Yuhao was astonished, and he had always been impressed by Wang Chua's senses. She had the golden dragon's perception, which was probably more sensitive, and at a higher level than his spiritual detection. After all, spiritual detection could only detect tangible things and real things, while Wang Chua's golden dragon perception had some clairvoyant abilities. What's wrong? When did it begin? He hurriedly pursued the issue. Wang Chua answered, I can't quite put a finger on it. There's this unsettling feeling in my heart, and it's there even though it's not serious. It began a few moments ago. It seems like the setting sun forest does have some abnormal entities. Hui Yuhao frowned and said, can you tell where this unsettling feeling is coming from? 15 minutes went by. Hui Yuhao opened his eyes once more, and Wang Chua opened her eyes at the same time, as if she had felt something, and looked in his direction. Go back. Hui Yuhao muttered calmly, all right. Wang Chua stood up, and a rare smile appeared on her face. Composure is a virtue. She turned around towards where they had come as she spoke. She took but a few steps before she unwittingly stopped in her tracks and turned back. Hui Yuhao was not there anymore, but he wasn't behind her. He was moving forward in the opposite direction, which meant he was going towards their initial destination. Hey! Did you not say that we're going back? Wang Chua shouted. She sounded a little melancholic. Hu Yuhao didn't stop moving as he said, "You can go back by yourself. You didn't have to accompany me on this dangerous adventure in the first place. Mind your own safety on the way back, goodbye." He began to pick up the pace and sped deeper into the setting sun forest as he spoke. Wang Qiu'er was rooted to the spot. She could feel an unprecedented aura from Hu Yuhao's body, and she felt as if his frame had become a lot bigger than before in that instant. She felt as if nothing could stop him on his path forward. Wang Qiu'er's powerful body started to quiver faintly. She lowered her head and muttered under her breath, a sentiment like this actually exists, where other people's lives are more important than your own. But only the strongest will survive, and we should do anything we can to continue living, whatever the means. We only live once, and we won't get this life back once it's gone. Hu Yuhao answered plainly, "You're right, we only live once. What you're talking about is the law of the jungle, but not the law of humanity. Humans have flesh, blood, and emotions. We are not soul beasts, and neither are we animals. We are humans. If everyone attempts to survive by doing anything he or she can, whatever the means, and if everyone views his or her own benefits and interests as more important than anything else, how different would we be from wild beasts? The main thing that distinguishes us from beasts is our emotions and our sentiments, and the fact that we know how to love." Wang Qiu'er's eyes were completely blank. Her eyes weren't just blank, it felt as if she was in a daze, and her emotions began to destabilize. Hu Yuhao had no idea why she was how she was, but he thought about it for a while and understood how she felt. Perhaps she encountered one too many dangers during that year she was living inside the Great Star Do Forest by herself, and those dangers gave her this desire to survive. An hour passed before Hu Yuhao made a gesture and immediately stopped walking. "Let's take another break." "How do you feel?" he turned and asked Wang Qiu'er. Wang Qiu'er's emotions had settled down by now, but her charming face was as cold as ever. She shot a cold glance at Hu Yuhao and said, "I am now absolutely certain that the place you're heading towards is the source of the danger. You already feel danger. But have you realized that there seem to be fewer and fewer soul beasts the further we go?" Hu Yuhao frowned as he informed her. Wang Qiu'er grunted coldly and said, "That's what is most terrifying. Soul beasts inhabit this area, yet they cannot live here, even though they're extremely adaptable. That shows how dangerous this area is. I think it won't take long before we will encounter these dangers firsthand." Hu Yuhao stared at her with a calm look and said, "It's not too late to change your mind." Wang Qiu'er said, "Stop spouting nonsense. Let me ask you, Hu Yuhao. Is Wang Dong'er the person that you are willing to throw your life away to save?" Hu Yuhao glanced at her, astonished. Wang Qiu'er continued, "I have been thinking about it, and I figured that only she is worth it." Hu Yuhao replied, "You're wrong. My companions are also worth risking my life for." Wang Qiu'er pressed on, and this time, "Is it her?" Hu Yuhao nodded his head lightly. Wang Qiu'er's eyes froze momentarily, and she grew silent for a few seconds. "I knew it." Hu Yuhao said, "Let's rest a little more. Did you not say that danger is about to come?" He didn't continue Wang Qiu'er's topic, because he realized that her eyes had become a little peculiar, to the point where her aura had changed. "All right." Wang Qiu'er didn't say anything else, as she casually found a place to sit down. They sat opposite each other quietly while they rested. This break was relatively shorter, as they hadn't traveled for too long before this. Hu Yuhao stood up again, after 15 minutes, and gazed forward into the distance. It was afternoon at this point, and there was still some time before evening. However, the temperature was starting to decline, and there was a crisp and cool feeling within the forest. There were far too few soul beasts within the setting sun forest at this moment. At least, Hu Yuhao drew this conclusion from his observations as they proceeded in that direction. They moved forward for another 15 minutes. Even Hu Yuhao felt a little unsettled at this point, and he had an ominous feeling that something was here that made him feel a little stifled and pressured. Wang Qiu'er murmured, "Wait." Hu Yuhao immediately halted in his tracks and turned towards her. "I also think something is amiss. How are you feeling, Qiu'er?" Wang Qiu'er surveyed her surroundings as she lowered her voice and said, "Have you realized that the light around us is a lot weaker than before?" Hu Yuhao had been using spiritual detection this whole time, but his spiritual detection was mainly focused on soul beasts that could appear, and other sources of danger that could attack them in some way. Wang Qiu'er's reminder made him realize that this place was a lot dimmer than before. Can it be because the sky is getting dark? He rarely came to the northern regions, so he didn't know much about the weather in these parts. Wang Qiu'er shook her head and said, "It's still afternoon. Even if we go further north, there can't be so little light. Furthermore, there are no clouds blocking the sun, and you can see the trees' shadows on the ground. Furthermore, we are comparing the sunlight now to how it was 15 minutes ago. How can the sky turn dark within such a short period of time?" There is only one possibility that can cause the light to dim and weaken, the air. Hui Yuhao asked doubtfully. Wang Qiuwa said, don't you have spiritual detection? Concentrate it on a relatively small area and focus on what's inside, observe and see how the air is changing in that space, and then jump up into the sky and perceive how different the air is up there from how it is down here. You should be able to discover something. All right, Hui Yuhao answered slowly. Hui Yuhao immediately focused his attention and used spiritual detection on the air in front of him. He discovered something different the moment he concentrated. Even his spirit eyes found it difficult to distinguish the fine dust that was drifting around through the air. These dust particles were pale white. They weren't thick and dense, but they were floating stably. They were inside a tremendous forest, and the air inside the forest should be a lot better than the outside world. These dust particles clearly wouldn't be here under normal circumstances. Hui Yuhao jumped into the air and activated his flying-type soul tool. His body was propelled upwards as he surged into the sky. He pierced 10 meters above the canopy, and his vision instantly lit up, as if he had just broken through some barrier, everything around him very bright and clear. Hui Yuhao was still using spiritual detection, and he immediately discovered that the fine particles disappeared completely once he was out of the forest. He looked down toward the setting sun forest beneath him, but his naked eye couldn't distinguish anything. A thought flashed by in Hui Yuhao's head. He continued channeling his flying-type soul tool so that he could fly even higher up. Hui Yuhao looked down once more when he went even higher, and he could finally see what was going on. The setting sun forest looked extremely calm, but there seemed to be a faint and thin fog floating around inside the forest. What made him even more astounded was the fact that this fog gradually dissipated and vanished where they came from, but it was a lot denser in the place they were heading towards. It felt as if a patch of cloud had descended on the forest, and even the vegetation was blurry and obscured. These clouds weren't just white, as he could even see multicolored hues in the distance. What is this? Hui Yuhao went inside to try it out, using spiritual detection to scan every single detail and component. He made sure that the internal regions were completely airtight before he came out, and began to work on something else on the outside. From Wang Qiuwa's perspective, Hui Yuhao was incessantly stripping things off the self-driving fort before he added something else in their place in a manner that seemed overly complicated. Another 2 hours passed before he finished refining his all-terrain self-driving fort, and the sky was started to turn dark. He began to retrieve soul tool after soul tool from his starlight sapphire storage ring, and laid them all out neatly on the ground. He took out 16 milk bottles, and some stationary soul cannon shells. These shells were marked with various patterns and markings, 4 to 6 of them altogether. Hui Yuhao picked out 9 shells that had red markings, and put the other shells away, before he took out another normal storage-type ring, and put it on his right hand's middle finger. He placed those 9 shells inside this ring. Hui Yuhao smiled when he heard "fool," as the images of Wang Donga and himself on the sea god's lake surfaced in his mind. I'm not a fool. I should be an idiot, Hui Yuhao chuckled in reply. Wang Qiuwa was taken aback. Is there something wrong with your brain? Hui Yuhao shook his head and said, she was the one that said that. She told me before that I'm an idiot, and I'm her idiot. No matter what, this idiot has to be idiotic one more time. The sky is getting dark, you should leave at first light tomorrow. If you wish, you can wait for me outside the setting sun forest, and you can go back without me if I'm not out within 3 days. However, please don't tell anyone about what happened to me. Just let them believe that I've disappeared. Wang Qiuwa's emotions erupted once more, and she began to shout at Hui Yuhao. Idiot! You truly are an idiot, and there's nothing that can save you from your idiocy. Is it worth it? Is it really worth it? Hui Yuhao didn't mince words as he replied decisively, yes, it's worth it. I have to try, no matter how much danger and peril I have to put myself through, so that Donga may continue to live. At the very least, I have to figure out the true mysteries contained within this place, and I will not give up even if there is but one sliver of hope. How can I look on with open eyes as Donga passes into the void from her hidden wound? How can I look on as my entire world turns grey? I can't let that happen. Wang Qiuwa bit down on her lower lip. Idiot, idiot. Idiot. Hui Yuhao didn't bother with her any longer, and he collected some relatively drier branches from around him and began to make a campfire. Hui Yuhao had no qualms about starting a fire here, as there weren't many soul beasts left in this area of the setting sun forest. He was quietly observing how the faint miasma in the air reacted to his campfire at the same time. I've been observing it using spiritual detection ever since I started the campfire, and I realized that the miasma has no way of resisting fire, and clearly vanishes around this campfire. It's apparent that flames are fatal to this miasma, I don't have any fire-type abilities, but some of the soul tools that I carry around can create some fire, and are proving extremely effective. I've already attached these soul tools to the all-terrain self-propelling fort, and I've made the fort even more airtight than before, along with some other changes that will be imperative to keeping us alive. Also, my second martial soul possesses ultimate ice. Perhaps ice won't have the same effect on the miasma as fire does, but the miasma carries minuscule toxins that will be greatly weakened under exceedingly cold temperatures. Furthermore, my ultimate ice can affect the water vapor that makes up the fog. The miasma will also be weakened without water vapor to help it permeate. I've combined all this with the prepared safeguards to keep us alive. Even if we can't venture too deep inside, we will have no problem breaking out, since all we have to do is prevent the miasma from corroding our flying-type soul tools. That being the case, we will have no problem escaping from here. The incredulity in Wang Chua's eyes grew stronger and stronger as she listened to Hu Yuhao's analysis. She was truly astonished. She had just been daydreaming beside him during this short period of time, but he had already come up with so many solutions to deal with the problem. Everything he said made perfect sense. Rational judgment told her that not everywhere within this miasma was dangerous, and they also had ice and fire to handle the problem. The danger from Wang Chua's point of view seemed to diminish. Hu Yuhao chortled as he stared at the astonished look on her face. Do you suddenly feel that I am smart and powerful? Wang Chua snapped, enough nonsense. Hurry up and rest. We'll get moving tomorrow. They began to meditate beside the campfire. The miasma was undeniably dangerous, but it also formed a protective dome around them. There were so few soul beasts in the area that they weren't threatened at all. The night passed without any other words. They surged out of the setting sun forest and continued to climb higher and higher. Their Class 6 flying-type soul tools propelled them up, and they quickly reached several hundred meters in the sky. However, Hu Yuhao showed no signs of stopping as he continued flying upward with Wang Chua. The miasma beneath them covered a tremendous area, which Hu Yuhao had roughly gauged beforehand. The strongest part of the miasma permeated to about 300 meters above ground, and these were the parts that had hints of color. The miasma here looked exceptionally beautiful, but was also exceedingly dangerous. They climbed to about 700 meters before Hu Yuhao stabilized his altitude. They were currently high enough to avoid the miasma's toxicity, and he took another glance at it before he pulled Wang Chua along and flew towards the place where the miasma was the thickest. Never once did he consider using the all-terrain self-propelling fort to move forward on the ground toward their destination. The miasma on the ground would become increasingly thick, which meant that it would also become more corrosive. This would take a continuous toll on the fort's protective barrier and his soul power, whereas using their flying-type soul tools expended a lot less. Wang Chua controlled her flying-type soul tool and flew behind him while she tilted herself backward, so that she wouldn't affect his flying-type soul tool's stability, as she grabbed his shoulders with both hands at the same time. Their martial souls began to fuse, greatly boosting Hu Yuhao's soul power. Hu Yuhao didn't pause at all, swinging his right hand and tossing the cannon shell in it down. It fell away rapidly, while he quickly supported the stationary soul cannon with his right hand and locked onto the shell with his spiritual detection. Just as Te cannon shell was about to pierce through the thick miasma, Hu Yuhao fired his soul cannon. Boom! The tremendous recoil pushed Hu Yuhao several meters through the air as a brilliant red beam erupted from his soul cannon. The cannon shell barreled forward at devastating speed, and went straight for the other cannon shell that Hu Yuhao had tossed out earlier. The shell fired by the stationary soul cannon naturally flew a lot faster than the one that was in freefall through the air. Hu Yuhao had used spiritual detection to lock onto his target, and his accuracy was comparable to ruler measurements. A red streak of light unerringly struck the cannon shell that had just plunged into the thick miasma. Boom, boom, boom. A series of explosions could be heard, and the thick miasma was immediately tainted fire red. The entire miasmic cloud began to tremble violently and tumultuously as sparks flew in all directions. Let's go. Hu Yuhao swiftly stored his stationary soul cannon before reaching back with his right hand and grabbing Wang Chua's arm, and they plunged towards the ground. The stationary soul cannon had opened a path, but it couldn't be maintained for too long. Once the high temperature dissipated, the thick miasma in the surroundings would immediately start to condense once more. 4 Class 5 stationary soul cannon shells had opened this path, and Hu Yuhao couldn't waste such a great opportunity. Their bodies plummeted rapidly, and they quickly dove toward the thick miasma. Hu Yuhao and Wang Chua could clearly see that the surrounding miasma was starting to close up at an alarming speed. The miasma was just too thick and dense, to the point where it seemed to materialize in the sky as it collapsed in on the hole. The vegetation beneath them was conspicuously different from the plants in the setting sun forest's outer regions. Many of these plants were dotted with colors, but this spectacle didn't represent anything good at all. Colorful plants often meant acute venom. This was common knowledge they had learned at Shrek Academy. Wang Chua was a little surprised as she observed, strange, the miasma on the ground isn't as dense as it is in the sky. This was true. They were in the miasma's core regions, and the miasmic clouds here were tinged with the colors of the rainbow. However, it was only present as a faint mist here, and even though it hindered their vision to a certain extent, it wasn't enough to block their line of sight completely. The miasma was undoubtedly a lot thinner than the thick and toxic clouds in the sky above them. Hu Yuhao explained, clouds and mist always permeate and drift away upward. I already noticed this, as even though the miasma is dense in these parts, it's obvious that it's drifting upward. So the miasma on the ground probably isn't as toxic as it is above us. However, these multicolored miasmic clouds are still extremely dangerous. I can already feel the miasma corroding my protective barrier, even though it's energy-based. Hu Yuhao had already determined the right direction when they were in the sky. He pulled Wang Chua and immediately proceeded towards their destination. They were very careful as they pushed forward. Cold energy condensed beneath Hu Yuhao's feet, and a layer of frost appeared on the ground with every step that he took so that he could block off the plants they were walking on. The soul protective barrier could clear away the plants in front of them, but it couldn't do anything against the plants beneath their feet, so Hu Yuhao had to resort to this clumsy method. There was no doubt that this consumed soul power, but it was safer than otherwise. He was not about to let himself come into contact with any of these venomous plants, or the multicolored miasma, as he had no idea how toxic these things could be. It would be almost impossible to retreat if something happened to him right here, or if a hole opened in his protective barrier. They began to see some things that made their skin crawl as they pushed forward. Enormous bones and skeletons would appear on the ground from time to time, and those bones were also as multicolored the miasma around them. Clearly, these weren't plants, but the remains of soul beasts that had perished from the poison. Crack! A sound could be heard from not too far away, which startled them both. They concentrated their soul power at almost the same time as they gazed in the direction the sound came from. A large skeleton began to lean sideways. The bones beneath it had clearly become fragile and brittle from the corrosion, and the skeleton crashed to the ground with a loud boom in the next moment, exploding into a million broken pieces. The brilliant colors above them became even denser than before. The toxic miasma was exceedingly corrosive, and Hu Yuhao could clearly feel that his soul power was being consumed at an alarming speed. This was definitely not something that he wanted to see, so he had no choice but to push forward more quickly than before. When they reached a point where both he and Wang Chua couldn't take it anymore, he would use an explosive incendiary bomb to open a path like before, and they would then use their flying-type soul tools to escape from this toxic world. It was the only way to stay alive. I've done it. Hu Yuhao's delighted voice could be heard, and Wang Chua was shocked awake as Hu Yuhao released her from his embrace at the same time. Wang Chua turned to look, and saw that the multicolored radiance had been replaced by icy blue colors in a 5-meter radius around them. Voluminous rainbow-colored particles had been blown into the air, and the dense miasmic particles that were originally plastered on the soul protective barrier vanished at the same time. This is the domain of perpetual ice. Hu Yuhao had used his domain of perpetual ice to freeze the water vapor within the toxic miasma, and he controlled these frozen particles to push outward so that his barrier was a little cleaner. This method was a little dubious, and it felt as if he was drinking poison to quench his thirst. In the end, the domain of perpetual ice consumed a lot of soul power, and Hu Yuhao wouldn't have decided on this method if not for the fact that his protective barrier was reaching the end of its life. Hu Yuhao withdrew his barrier at this moment and released it again immediately afterwards. His soul power consumption was instantly restored to the optimal level. Hu Yuhao also took this opportunity to take a breather. Wang Chua forcibly suppressed her palpitating heartbeat as she suggested calmly, "Why don't you use your third eye to probe around? We may consume a lot more soul power if we continue going around in circles." This video will end here. Thank you for watching.